Hey everybody, Grady's Gadgets back again. I know everybody's probably heard about biodiesel and you may not know exactly what it is, but biodiesel is converting cooking oil into usable diesel you can run in your diesel truck. And a lot of people think, oh, they're just taking cooking oil and they're just cleaning it really good and running in your truck. Well, not really, because making biodiesel involves a chemical reaction where you're mixing stuff and making it separate. Anyway, when I do it, I get 5-gallon buckets of cooking oil from my favorite local restaurant, and I go pick it up like once a month, and then it goes into a centrifuge. And so when you get raw cooking oil, it's kind of dark, kind of nasty looking, but it turns into the final product is this is a jar of biodiesel and water on the bottom. It's one of the last tests I do. You put about half and half, and then you shake it up. And when you shake it up, it turns white and milky, and then you just let it sit in the sunlight. And if it's good biodiesel, it'll have clear water and clean biodiesel on top. And as you can see, you could probably read a newspaper through it. It's very clear, and that part of it's ready to go in my truck. So, how do you get there? Well, the centrifuge itself is where it has what I call a spinner. And so the oil, cooking oil, is pumped through into the spinner, and it spins, and all the impurities in it stick to the inside of the spinner. So you let it run for about 2 hours, and you take it apart and clean it, put it back together, and let it run another 2 hours. The drum itself has a heater. It's a band heater that straps around the drum to keep it warm, and it needs to be about 155, 160 degrees for it to work well. And so after many runs, then it gets clean enough that I can process it. So from here, I have a small block Chevrolet oil pump that I hook a drill to, and it works really good, and it pumps it over into my homemade processor. Now this was a 30-gallon water heater. Of course, it's turned upside down because the shape of it, now the top of it is shaped in a conical shape, nice and round. So if you turn it upside down and plumb out the bottom like I did, then you can drain everything out of it. It'll go near about completely dry. But what it really does, it's got a hot water heater pump that circulates from the bottom into the top, and it moves pretty fast. I think it's 12 gallons a minute or something like that, but it will constantly circulate, and it has an electric hot water heater element so that I can heat it up and circulate it at the same time. Well, when it gets to about 125 degrees, at that point I mix in a concoction of methanol and lye. And so you have to do a chemical test on your oil to find out how much to mix together. That's where the mad scientist in me really comes out. But anyway, for this processor, usually it's 4 gallons of methanol with about 400 grams of lye. Mix that together, and then you inject it into the system while it's running. And so you let it mix for about 90 minutes, and you just turn it off, let it sit. And then the chemical reaction takes place as it's sitting still, and the biodiesel will separate from what I call the goop. And the goop is kind of what's in this bucket, pretty thick, nasty, and it actually turns into gel when it gets cool. And believe it or not, you can make soap out of that, which I've done. And it works as good as Gojo. I'm a mechanic, so I need some pretty heavy duty soap, and that there works as good or better than Gojo. Anyway, so after 3 hours, the goop comes out, and so you got raw biodiesel in there, but it's not really clean yet. So I turn it back on and turn it wide open, and I have a distilling system that allows the vapors of the methanol, because there's going to be some leftover methanol in there, and you don't want that running in your diesel truck. So the system recirculates into itself. It gets hot enough to where it's trying to boil the methanol, and it makes vapors. So it goes to the top, and it gets vacuumed out and put into a recovery tank. So it takes about 4 to 6 hours for that to happen. and I can get as much as a half a gallon, maybe 3 quarts of methanol recovered back out of each batch. And I can use that for other stuff later on. So basically it takes a day to produce some decent methanol, but it's not perfect. So from here it gets pumped in. I just have a holding tank. And so I like to pump it in there and let it sit for a day, because if there's any impurities, it's heavier than biodiesel and it'll sink to the bottom, and you get some more of this biodiesel goop out of the very bottom of this one also. After it sits for a day at least, maybe 2, then I pump it over into the wash tank. And believe it or not, I use water to clean the biodiesel. You'd think, well, there's no way. Well, yeah. Into the blue tank, it has a sprayer in the top that sprays a real fine mist of water into the top of the biodiesel. And when that water gets to it, it sinks down to the bottom real slow. And if there's any more impurities or any methanol, it brings it with it and it goes right out the bottom. And I can drain that off, and eventually you get closer and closer to really good methanol. That's when it comes out of there, becomes clear like that, and I test it. And if I can shake it up and it turns out like this, boom, you got good biodiesel. The next step, it may still have some moisture left in it from the water wash. So it gets pumped into this tank, and it's got a pump and a miniature water heater. And so again, it pumps it into itself and it aerates. In other words, it makes a lot of bubbles. And so those bubbles allow any moisture or methanol to evaporate out of it. And so it gets heated up to probably 130 degrees or so, which helps get rid of all the water and methanol, helps get it out of there. And then it gets pumped into the good drum, and that's where you come over here with your jugs, you just fill it up, and there's your biodiesel. Put it right in your truck. It's a little cloudy today because it's cool. Any other days, clear as a bell, read a newspaper through it. So that's how I make biodiesel. I don't know how everybody else does it, but that's how I do it. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.